Good morning. We continue our final parts of the essay that I wrote on the conclusion of Ayin Beis. And I want to dedicate this class to Meira's mother. Her yahrzeit is today, 21st of Elul. Dvorah Edel Bat Basya and Chazana. Okay. So let's go to the essay. As I said, we're almost at the end of it. We discussed in the last classes the difference between Hemshech Ayin Beis and Hemshech Samach Vav, which are the two great series or serial Maimorim that the Rebbe Rashab delivered and wrote. And we discussed how each of them, primarily the Samach Vav, focuses primarily on the Aveda Momatlama, Aveda B'Koyach Atzmai, divesting ourselves of our material structures and connecting to the transcendent. And then Ayin Beis focuses on that as well, but the additional primary focus on manifesting that divine transcendent in our structure, in our existence. And then, of course, there's the joining of both, Yechud Tata, Yechud Elo, which is the conclusion of Ayin Beis, which we reviewed in depth throughout this essay. So we're on I finished page 46. We also explained the Rebbe's words in 1976 in Yutas Kislev Farbrengen, where he said that Ayin Beis is neflois, wonders, even compared to the wonders of Samach Vav. So I suggested that could referring to two levels of neflois, of Pella. One level, Samach Vav addresses, like we spoke about, the Pella Chochmah is a keli for Keser, and the other is the total unification of both Mamay Lamata and Mamata Lamayla, which is the higher level of Pella and Aleph. So to break it down really, there's Mamata Lamayla, Mamay Lamata, and then there's the joining of both of them together. Aramimcha Lekai HaMelech from the bottom up, Aramimcha Lekai HaMelech from the top down, and then the union of both. And with that, we concluded page 46. I'm going to read now literally the end of my essay. So I'm on top of page 47. The essay is posted at our WhatsApp Ayin Beis group. So on top of 47, here's what I write. Kol Hanal, all the above, hi hashara b'derech efsher. Basically, it's a speculation, possible understanding. In my humble opinion, in explaining the conclusion of Hemshech Terav that the Rebbe Rashab never wrote the ending to. And I'm respectfully requesting comments and reflections from those that are reading this essay, reading this journal. And God should forgive me if I made any mistake. And then I conclude with a blessing, but it's also connected to this whole theme. B'hi ratzon, and may it be God's will, sheniske kvar lazman shala yichud tata v'yichud elah, lamata, we should finally merit to the time where there be the complete realization of the unification of the unity below and the unity above. In the fulfillment of the divine plan and intention of Atzmus, where God desired to have a home in this lowest of worlds. In the language of the conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis, is literally the last words the Rebbe Rashab wrote. This is the union of Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad, and Shema. Hashem Elokeinu b'chinas yichud elah. You say Hashem Elokeinu, you're talking about the higher yichud. That everything from the God's perspective, everything is godliness. Hashem Echad Yichud Tata. From the perspective of existence, that existence is really driven by the divine energy. V'shneim heim beposuk echad, and both these yichudim, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, are in the same verse. Shema, lemahave echad beechad, basically to join echad and echad. Shagam yichud tata, that also the lower unity, hu b'chinas yichud kama yichud elah mamish, is unified exactly like the higher unity. That's the ultimate fusion and the seamlessness of all these levels of unity. And that concludes Ayin Beis. So though Ayin Beis still did not finish all the points, but the conclusion itself also highlights and underscores the very essential theme of Ayin Beis. And a few comments here. Ulahoyer, medivrei admur nishmaseid. Now, you'll find a very fascinating fact that in the last words of the Rebbe Rashab in his lifetime, which were documented by a chassid named Rab Berel, or Moshe Dov Ber Rifkin, who was helping the Rebbe Rashab. He was a bacher, he was a student that was assisting, and he wrote a diary called Ashkafta the Rebbe. Ashkafta the Rebbe means the Rebbe's, essentially, I don't like to say deathbed, but that Ashkafta means the Rebbe's bed, resting. So it's referring to the last days of the Rebbe Rashab's life. It's a very dramatic and poignant and very emotional document that I have a number of times reviewed, and in my life, because it's applied, sometimes I mention it here. So I found there some expressions that Rebbe Rashab said in the last day of his life that literally reflect this theme and conclusion of Ayin Beis. And it's interesting to comment on the words of the Rebbe Rashab in the last day of his life in this world. Quote, his chabrus from Yichud Elah and Yichud Tata. He was heard saying that in the middle of the night, I think, or the last day or a night of, as I said, as he was a neshama down this world. His chabrus from Yichud Elah and Yichud Tata. Literally, the very words of the end of Ayin Beis and the central theme of Ayin Beis. That's the Ashkafta the Rebbe, page 91. If you want to read it's Hebrew. It's a really relatively easy Hebrew, but it's a very, very powerful diary and document. So then he says that on page 91. Le'el Sham Omed 81, and earlier in that very same document, he writes, again, words from the Rebbe Rashab, quote, Evet is battle a bittel atzmi. He's speaking in the third person. He becomes completely sublimated in a core bittel, meaning he's losing his entire identity in a positive way. He's being absorbed. A bittel b'mitzias. A bittel b'mitzias, which is not bittel hayesh, but a bittel b'mitzias. Again, similar themes to what we've been talking about. A bittel shalamayla metam v'das. All the Rebbe Rashab's actual words. A bittel that's super rational. Vorem as is meir agili er atzmi. Because when a core energy radiates, is the bitla atzmi. So when you have a reflection of a light that's not a core light, it's only a reflective light, so the bitla is also going to be on a lower level. But when it's coming from a gilia er atzmi, the bitla is a bitl atzmi, a bitl b'mitzias. Was dosid der, he's speaking Yiddish, of course, but dosid der elecha Hashem nafshi esa. That to you, Hashem, my soul longs or rises. V'dosid the tefillah, v'dosid in tefillah Shabbos. That's in tefillah Shabbos. Was the by halten mir. That's where we're up to. Because remember, the Rebbe Rashab passed away Mitzvah Shabbos. So this was being said literally in the either Shabbos or right after Shabbos, not exactly sure what moment, but this is all of what he said, that this is this level of Shabbos. Asoga v'izbonnus, it's continuing the Rebbe Rashab's language, a comprehension and a contemplation. As sich mizbeinu mit hasoga rechova. He contemplates with an expansive comprehension. Vete mizbatel legamri. He becomes completely nullified. As es vet mizbatel the yesh for neshama. That the yesh of the neshama also has a substance as it comes down below, becomes mizbatel. He's basically hinting to his the passing, the istalkus, because the neshama basically is going back into its source. Doesn't say it explicitly, but this is all the Rebbe Rashab's last words. So what's fascinating, and also of course quite sad at the time, was that he's speaking the language of Chassidus, but it's the language of the end of Ayin Beis. Like he said, the yichud, tischabrus from yichud elo and yichud tata, and it's the central theme of Ayin Beis. So it wasn't just the Rebbe Rashab wasn't just writing ideas; he was living it. And now, in his last moments, his last breaths, you can say, he literally is expressing these words. And if I recall correctly, some of them were said that he was very not well already. He had high temperature. So some were said almost, you can say, superconsciously. Not necessarily, he wasn't trying to deliver a mimer or something. It was being whispered, and Rabbi Rifkin heard it. So he wrote down what he heard. But this was the Rebbe Rashab speaking to himself. So it's quite illuminating to know what the Rebbe Rashab, where his mind, his soul, where his heart was in these last moments. So that's why I'm bringing it, because it's so connected to the very themes that we're discussing in a very personal way. The Rebbe Rashab's, as I said, last moments on this earth. That would be 1920 Beis Nissen, which goes back. We're talking now. Now we're 2025. We're talking about 105 years ago, right? Yeah.
He also said then, Ich gehe in Himmel und ich sage ihm, lass ich ein.
Let's read the next paragraph, and you'll see I bring that. And here's how I conclude the essay. Sheniska, we should merit the kol zeh, to all of this that the Rebbe Rashab says, b'tur neshamas begufim lamata, as souls within bodies below, not just as a soul outside of a body. Which means, nesef lezeh, in addition to what the Rebbe Rashab himself said, sha'adei haksovim, at the same time, the same period, the Rebbe Rashab asked his family, his assistants, to take his bed and carry his bed into the Zal. The Zal is the Beis HaMedrash where he would say Chassidus. The very Beis Medrash. It was in Rostov, not in Lubavitch, but that's the Beis Medrash. And then he said the following words. In those Beis Medrash, you also have all the writings and the manuscripts that the Rebbe Rashab wrote. So he said that through these Ksavim, we should have Yeshlon HaRebbe K'moishu B'Shamayim. So in addition to having the Rebbe as he's in heaven, in the words of the Rebbe Rashab, Ich gehe in Himmel, I'm going to heaven. The Ksavim Lozich Faraich, the writings, the manuscripts, I leave for you. Nemt mich in Zal. He said, take me into the Zal, into the hall, into the study hall. Ve'em in einem, and we'll be as one. This is there in Ashkafta the Rebbe, page 92. Ve'em in einem. So I'm writing here that we shouldn't just have the Rebbe through the writings, but ve'em in einem im Rebbe lamata mamish, that we should merit to be with the Rebbe down here below. The words of the Rebbe, the end of Basar Legani, Tovshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe says the following. We should see the Rebbe here below. Below the 10 cubits means all the way down below. Begula amitis v'ashlema teikum v'miyad mamish. With a full and complete, the true and complete redemption, and that should be immediately. And with that, I conclude this essay. Basically, on this note, demonstrating and reflecting how the Rebbe Rashab himself is speaking about the Yichud of Yichud Tata, Yichud Elah, and then when he says, I want to be one with the Chassidim, so yes, there's one being one through his teachings and writings, which we have now, but then there's being one, actually one, which is the ultimate Yichud Tata, Yichud Elah, when we're united, not just spiritually, but also physically. So I thought this is an appropriate ending to an essay that's all about the conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis, the magnum opus of the Rebbe Rashab, and connecting it also to his own words and his own life, as he sums up and concludes the last days of the Rebbe Rashab's life in this world, with the same message, both personally and collectively. So there we have it. Finished the essay is now at the middle of page 47. A long essay that we've done in the last few months that we've been reading it, or last month or two. And that's that. So now I open this up for questions or comments, and then we have to figure out where we go from here. So you see how it all ties together. Samach Vav, Ayin Beis, the Rebbe Sichi Yutas Kislev, the publishing of Ayin Beis, Niflois and Lefnois, and now how it's expressed in the Rebbe Rashab personal life, how he describes his own so-called absorption into Elokus. Okay. Are there any comments, questions, anything?
It's a beautiful ending.
Yeah.
And the irony, or the irony of those words, his final words, connecting with the final themes of his second magnum opus, which is really volume 2 of his 2 magnum opuses, it's a little eerie. I mean, it's like not eerie. It makes sense, but it's wild. I mean, it's mind blowing.
Yep.
Did you find that first and then you wrote the ending, or did it kind of, the two came together?
I always knew that. I always knew what it says in the Shkafta the Rebbe. I was, quite familiar with it.
Uh-huh.
But when I was writing it, it's clearly connected to the literally the conclusion of Ayin Beis.
That's pretty wild, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. Well, he was living with what he wrote,
Literally.
This is his life.
Yeah. But not just that, you're saying the same thing. He was experiencing it. So he was
that's
telling.
what I mean by living, yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating that he was, one wishes he could have had more strength to be able to describe it more in more layman's terms. But of course, it's a beautiful, even to have the presence of mind to give that over in his final breaths is still unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, certainly a great one.
Yeah.
He left us with some real keys.
Are there any other questions or comments? Because I want to say this about Ayin Beis itself, if I may. I said I would speak about it today. But before I do, anything else from anyone? Okay. I mentioned yesterday that the Yutas Kislev Farbrengen, when the Rebbe spoke about Ayin Beis, I'll just elaborate a bit more. He started off by saying, there's something that has been irking me, that's been bothering me for a long time now. The Rebbe's words in Yiddish. And he told the following. He shared the following. That this seems like it was in the 30s. He says, well, my father-in-law was traveling and we had left Russia already. Soviet Union, he had given me the Hemshech Ayin Beis to watch over. So clearly, because of his upheavals, he wanted it to be, make sure it's in a safe place. So I guess he gave him other things as well, but he also gave him the whole Hemshech Ayin Beis. Now remember, Ayin Beis was not published yet. We only had the first 40, I'm not sure how many, 50 discourses maybe, till the end of Vayigash. Actually, till the end of the first section of Ayin Beis, of Ksarim, of Kesed. But everything after that was only a manuscript and was never publicized. So no one had it, except the Frierdiker Rebbe, of course. So the Frierdiker Rebbe is sharing that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave it to him to watch over. You got to hear the Rebbe, the way the Rebbe describes it. He says, when I saw what I had, I knew right away I better make a copy of it because I don't know what's going to be next. You know, my father-in-law could ask him back for me. The Rebbe said, Kedem Vos Vi, before anything happened, I just went and made a copy of it all. He photocopied it all. To make sure that he would have this treasure. And then the Rebbe brings halacha. It says if someone gives you a sefer to watch over, you're not allowed to look into it because you're only watching, you're only a shemer. It's not yours to benefit from. You're just supposed to protect it. However, there's one exception. If you give it to a Talmid Chacham to be the shemer, so the person giving it knows that a scholar is not going to be able to control himself, and he's going to naturally look into the sefer. So the fact that he gave it to him means that he's already, essentially, even without stating as much, recognizing his status, basically has the right to look into it. The Rebbe said the following. He says, I'm not going to establish whether I'm a Talmid Chacham or not. Let others do that. But one thing is for sure, that my father-in-law knew that if he gave me something, there's no way I'm going to keep it a secret. At some point, I'm going to publicize. So the Rebbe equated it that since his father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, knew that, by giving it to him, he wasn't, God forbid, transgressing any prohibition of not making any benefit from what it was given to him, because the Frierdiker Rebbe knew that he's a person that is going to publicize it ultimately. Okay, but here's the dilemma. So what's the dilemma? He says, all these years since my father-in-law gave it to me, I think he gave back the original. But the copy has remained with me. Ad hayom hazeh, the Rebbe said. Till this day, I have the copies that I made back then. And I never publicized it. And on one hand, we're publishing everything in Chassidus these days. Because remember, in the 70s, the Rebbe was already publishing all the manuscripts. Ayin Beis was the only thing that was, well, there were things still not published, but it was in the process of being published. But Ayin Beis was still sitting by the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, so on one hand, we're publishing all of Chassidus. On the other hand, I have this manuscript, and I'm not publicizing it. So the dilemma is what to do with it. And then the Rebbe said these words, that the not publishing of it was connected with achshash. Achshash means a concern. You could say, he doesn't say the word danger, but clearly achshash is a word where there's concerns why not to publish it. Now the concerns are not technical ones you can imagine. So that, and the Rebbe says, and it was clear that the concerns were legitimate. The Rebbe did not explain what he meant. At the time, we tried to research and find out. Not the Rebbe's secretaries. No one had any clue what the Rebbe was referring to. Everyone thought the Ayin Beis wasn't printed primarily because there was no money. It was even discussed in earlier years. It was a big hemshech. But here the Rebbe suddenly saying it's connected to achshash. An achshash that had a nisinus makom, meaning there was a legitimate grounds for this concern. So we don't know what it meant. I'm going to try to talk about it now for a moment. So the Rebbe said there was achshash. On the other hand, Chassidus is meant to be yefutza meinesecha chutza, and everyone knows I do everything possible to spread Chassidus. So this was the Rebbe's dilemma. On one hand, there was concern. On the other hand, he did take it, and the Friedrich Rebbe knew that he would ultimately publicize it. So the Rebbe said, I finally came up with an eitzah. I have a solution to the dilemma. I'm going to throw the hemshech among Chassidim. I'm not going to take the responsibility myself. I'm going to give the hemshech to Chassidim. Every chassid will contribute $1, not more, not less. It's not to pay for the expenses, but it's to participate in a token way that it's a collective effort. So everyone gives $1. We'll publish Ayin Beis, but because of the concerns, we won't publish it with any names. Generally speaking, when you look at all this Sifrei Kahos and the Maimarim, it says right away in the Pesach Dover, in the introduction, Al Pi Hayros Kved Gusham, the Rebbe, based on the directive of the Rebbe, we're publishing this in this book, and it says who prepared it and who made the footnotes and a lot of details. The Rebbe says we're not going to do any of that. It won't say any names. Not those that published it, not those that prepared it, nothing. If you look at Ayin Beis, you'll see till this day, there's no names in it. Except the Rebbe Rashab's name, of course, because that's the Shablat, that's the cover page. It's his Hemshech. So it remains
There was
still.
somebody that wanted to give a lot of money for that, but the Rebbe answered that this is not the idea. The idea is only $1.
Exactly. So till this day, this mystery still remains. What was the chash? What was the concern? And why it, and until this day, it still has no names in it, because the Rebbe didn't want to associate it with anyone specific. That way, if there's a concern, it's not affecting anyone. Now,
that wasn't the whole Hemshech, right?
That was the whole Hemshech, yeah.
Oh, all 3 volumes, yeah.
I'm talking about that's till then we had the first 50.
I got you.
Yeah, now he gave it all out, and they began preparing it back then at the end of 1976, and it came out within the next year. You had all the 3 volumes published. Then they made an index on it. So I want to address that. What exactly is going on? And Chassidim did remark that the year afterwards, Simchas Torah, Tavshin Mem, Shmini Atzeres, Tavshin Mem, Tavshin Lamed Ches, literally, this was Yutas Kislev Lamed Zayin, the next Shmini Atzeres, the Rebbe had a heart attack. Furthermore, 14 years later, they republished Ayin Beis, the second edition because it ran out. They published it again. And the Rebbe had a stroke in Tavshin Nun Beis, 1992, 14 years after 1977. 1978, Lamed Ches Nun Beis. I'm not saying for sure there's a connection, but it's an interesting coincidence that right after the Rebbe said there's a chash and they printed Ayin Beis, the Rebbe himself had first a heart attack and later a stroke. So I want to address this thing with the chash. I've been asked this question many times. As I said, we've done research. Nobody has any clue. There's no document. There's no thing the Rebbe ever referred to. It was never known. I personally asked the Rebbe's secretaries, Rabbi Groner, who would have known because he was closest, and nobody's ever figured it out. So I was thinking about it, and I want to share the following, which is part of, obviously, the whole theme of Ayin Beis. So what is about Ayin Beis that Samach Vav doesn't have, that all the other Maimorim don't have, that there was a chash? Why Ayin Beis? So the other place to find some reference, is there any other reference to Achshash when it comes to spreading Chassidus? And the answer is yes. The Alter Rebbe himself. We know when the Alter Rebbe was arrested, which would later become the Chag HaGeula and Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus called Yutes Kislev. So the arrest technically came because there was a Mesirah, there was informers of the Misnagdim who were against the Alter Rebbe, and they informed to the Tsar's, establishment that the Alter Rebbe was a threat to the Tsar because he supported Israel, and Israel was then under the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, and Turkey and Russia were mortal enemies. So this is part of the conspiracy. They made up a whole blood libel. That was the technical reason. But the Rabbi made it very clear there's no way that the Alter Rebbe would be arrested for
The
technical
Alter
reasons.
Rebbe was-
A second, I'm middle of speaking. Why not? Can I finish and then let me just middle of a sentence, literally. So the Rabbeim said there's no way the Alter Rebbe was arrested just for technical reasons. There had to be a deeper thing. And the Rabbeim say very clearly, and the Alter Rebbe himself acknowledged it, or even said it, that it was because there was a kitrug l'mayla. In heaven, there was a kitrug, there was a complaint was brought, that the Alter Rebbe is revealing Pnimius HaTeira in unprecedented ways. Is that a permissible thing to do? We knew that Kabbalah and Pnimius HaTeira was always kept very secret. Only Yechidei Gula, individuals. And even though it's true that Baal Shem Tov began, and before that the Arizal, but it was still quite contained. To the point, the famous story where Pinchas Koretz, or who is it? I'm not sure. But the bottom line was that, not Pinchas Koretz, I think it was, maybe Pinchas Koretz, that there was people, Chassidim, were talking about this over in that period in time, because now Pnimius HaTeira is like the treasure of all treasures, and people who may not appreciate Torah and Pnimius HaTeira may will take it for granted, or even in a way, what's the word? Desecrate it in a certain way. And while they were speaking and they were asking that question about the Maggid teaching Chassidus, someone noticed a page of Chassidus was found on the floor in the shul. And they say, you see, it's not being appreciated. The fact that it could fall on the floor means people are not really treasuring it. If it was a real treasure, no one would ever allow it to fall on the floor. So it was symbolic in some people's minds of it maybe being a sign that it's being spread, and you have to really control its dissemination to people who really appreciate it, because it's such a crown jewel. And the Alter Rebbe then gave the classic example. And he said, a king whose only child fell ill, deathly ill, to the point the doctors had given up on him. And there was no way. They looked for every type of cure, nothing could be found. Until one rare doctor came and said, perhaps the king in his crown has a special jewel, crown jewel, that is very rare. If you crush it, it has a specific powder in it. If you mix that powder with liquid and you try to force it between the clenched teeth of the comatose child, it may save his life. Even if you get one drop in and the rest of it spills on the floor. Now this was the crown jewel. This was the jewel that made the crown so unique. And the king, without hesitation, said, absolutely. What do I need the crown for if my child is going to die, my heir? So the Alter Rebbe said that when the Baal Shem Tov came, the Jewish people were like in a comatose state, spiritually. And things would get worse. So the Eibishter sent the Baal Shem Tov and then the Chassidus that follows him to be like, even though, yes, it's the crown jewel, and even though you may crush it and it may even spill on the floor, like that page that was on the floor, but if one drop saves the child's life, it's all worth it. Because what is the whole Torah and the whole Pnimius HaTeira worth if Hashem doesn't have his Yidden? God forbid. Later, the Maggid would say to the Alter Rebbe that because of that, you in a way got rid of a kitrug on me, because the complaint was on the Maggid for teaching Chassidus. To the point that says in the Sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that's why one of two reasons, that the Alter Rebbe merited that by the Tahara, after the passing of the Maggid, he merited to the Tahara of the head of the Maggid. The biggest chus is the head of a tzaddik, when you metayr it and preparing it for burial. So who was zeichet to the head? It was the Alter Rebbe, and one of the schusim was because the Maggid had told him, you saved my life. You saved my life by giving that example and finding a limud schus for the spreading of Chassidus. So based on that, it's very clear that the Gilui of Chassidus is a major, unprecedented revelation, and all the forces of evil and Sitra Achra will do everything possible to fight it. That's how it works. Zel Umazeh. Whenever there's going to be a great revelation, look what happened by Matan Torah. Great revelation, and the Sitra Achra then mobilizes its forces, and ultimately the Jews built a golden calf. So wherever there's great revelation, there's always going to be a chash and some type of thing that can be that's negative. Not because the thing itself, spreading Torah and Chassidus, how could there be anything negative about spreading Torah? You know, God forbid if someone does something wrong, you could understand. But Alter Rebbe was spreading Chassidus, and yet he was arrested. And in the middle of his arrest, while he was in prison, the Baal Shem Tov Maggid visited him. And he asked them, what should I do once they told him, you'll be fine, you'll be freed from prison. So he said, what should I do when I'm freed from prison? Should I continue? Or is this a sign that I shouldn't continue spreading Chassidus, teaching Chassidus, Chabad? And they said, on the contrary, your freedom will demonstrate that not only should you continue, but you should only intensify. And that's what Alter Rebbe did, what we call in Chassid, by Chassidim, the Rabbeim, Far Peterburg, Nach Peterburg. Peterburg is Petersburg. That's where the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe sat in prison. So before Peterburg, we say the Chassidus of the Alter Rebbe was much more brief. And then after Peterburg, he began to elaborate even more. So the bulk of Chassidus Chabad, as we know it from the Alter Rebbe, came after the liberation of Yutas Kislev. Because like the Rebbe Rashab says in a Sikha, he says, even though it's difficult to say, he said those words. But you could say the Alter Rebbe in prison was like an olive that doesn't produce the best oil until it's pressed. So the Alter Rebbe being pressed, meaning suffering, those 53 days in prison, which correspond, by the way, to the 53 chapters of Tanya, Likutei Amorim, that brought out the oil, the deepest. Like it says, Kashayano Esek Ken Yirbe V'Chen Yufritz, the Torah tells us. That I'm adding. That the more the Jews were afflicted, the more they flourished, the more they thrived and blossomed. So what do you see from this? That on one hand, the Gilui Pnimis HaTorah is a tremendous thing. And it comes to save the Jewish people. And it's a taste of Mashiach and all of that. But at the same time, it comes with certain risks. So could be, that since Ayin Beis is that magnum opus, that really, in no Chassidus before it, brought together all the Mamorim in such a comprehensive way, that the Rebbe saw it as like the last Gilui Chassidus before Mashiach. And that Ayin Beis, which carries all these secrets that we've been learning, some we're aware of, some we're not aware of, but some, well, I'm sure we'll become aware of, that it could be the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe was referring to that chash. So it's just like the Alter Rebbe in his time. There's a chash here, and that's why the Rebbe took precautions of how to publish it, which also tells us the gravity and the power of what Ayin Beis is, because it has the power to bring Mashiach, and there's indeed, yes, the chash, but once the Rebbe said to publish it, we stand on the Rebbe's shoulders. I remember when I began teaching Ayin Beis, or middle somewhere, someone had asked me, aren't you concerned about the chash? You're teaching Ayin Beis, the Rebbe said there's a chash. I said, first of all, the way we're learning it, I'm not sure there's a chash. You know, you really know, maybe for high-level people. Secondly, once the Rebbe published it, he didn't publish it for not to be learned. So I take full responsibility. The Rebbe basically published it. Now, whether the heart attack and then later the stroke was a certain price that was paid, that can be discussed and theorized and speculated on. I'm just sharing what we know and what we could possibly know. So it's a good conclusion to everything we've been learning. And when you learn Ayin Beis, you could see, I mean, we've been talking the revolution of it, and even the revolution of joining quantum and the indeterminism and determinism we've been discussing, that Ayin Beis does have the power and has the key, you could say the formula of ultimately tipping the scale and bringing Mashiach. So that would explain why was a chash connected to it. So that's my thoughts on this matter.
It's very
Happy
Well,
to hear
can
comments.
you give us some more examples besides the one you just mentioned that Ayin Beis brought out that wasn't in the all the depth and all the memorum until then? This is the only one I was thinking about that the days, and I don't know enough to even say. So could you please list some
Examples,
of
what,
them?
like the Alter Rebbe being in prison, like that?
No, 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 no. Of the content of Ayin Beis that was
What was it?
maybe
It's
that wasn't
1400.
mentioned. No,
The
but
whole
yeah, but
Ayin
there could be
Beis.
more. But it's a lot of pratim in it that maybe was in the other ones, but without the pratim. I mean, something completely
What's that?
revolutionary.
For
That
14
was it.
years. We've been learning it now for 12 years, 1,472 pages. And I can't even begin to say every class, in my opinion, has chidushim and ayin beis that don't exist in previous memorim.
I didn't see. I don't know the other Maimorim as much as I've learned Ayin Beis with you for many, many
Yeah, what should I
years.
tell you? So
Yeah, that's why I'm
what I
asking
have
you.
what do you mean? We just finished the whole thing with Hamagbi L'Shevis of the Alter Rebbe and what Ayin Beis adds to it.
Mhm.
Just have to go back to the classes. This is exactly what I did in every class. We compared it to previous memorim, and we see there was a whole piece in the essay, a whole chapter 6 was about all the chidushim that Ayin Beis adds to the Maimer HaMagbil Shevis of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, just as an example. There are many, many. I am not going to go over now 12 years of classes. That's every class has that. I would just suggest going back. You can go like a stick a needle, and you'll find always something in Ayin Beis.
Can I ask, and maybe you don't know, I mean, you just spent the past 10 or 15 minutes talking about the issue of this chashash, this fear or concern. So my question does not ask you to say, wait a second, I just told you that for 15 minutes. I'm asking you personally, what is but Prad or Klal, either specifically here or in general, what's the fear or concern about releasing, let's say, the secrets to life, if you will, which is really what we're talking about here.
That's exactly what my answer is. You gave the answer. I just said that for the last 20 minutes.
I knew you were going to say
Yes,
that's why.
Robert,
Hold
can
on.
I'm
I?
not even sure what you're
I'm
asking.
not finished. I haven't asked my question.
Say, but you have the answer for the Alter Rebbe why he had to sit in prison. What was the concern there?
No, no. My question to you is philosophically, conceptually, what is the problem with the secret to life, if you will,
I
being
asked you with the Alter Rebbe. Do you understand why there was a challenge in heaven for him teaching Chassidus? Do you understand the answer to that question? Let's
I
start with
see.
Alter Rebbe.
I understand your answer is no, I don't. And so how could we understand the answer here? Is that the
So I'm
issue?
saying, I want to know if you understand that, and here you don't understand it, or you don't understand that either.
Honestly, I don't. I mean, I understand the words that you said, but I don't understand conceptually the problem with releasing the secrets to life.
Okay. Well, then either I didn't say, either I was incoherent because literally that was my question, that was my answer. You want me to go over the answer again?
I guess,
I
but
mean,
Keith,
I'm not even sure what to add.
what harm comes from releasing?
Anyway, why don't you just listen to this class again and tell me if you still have the question? That's what I would suggest. Because I'm going to say now is I'm just going to repeat what I just said.
Rabbi Jacobson, let me ask you a question. For humanity as a total,
What's that?
Matan Torah,
I want to know one thing. In this group here, did anyone understand my answer, or you all don't
no,
understand?
I understood your answer. I
Absolutely,
just have one question.
absolutely.
One second. I have one comment.
Yeah.
Throughout humanity, forget this generation or generation that came before us. Throughout humanity of Jewish history, at Matan Torah, it says that we had so much revelation and so much that even the lowest of lowest was higher than any prophet that ever lived. So that means that these concepts were already released into the world. It's not. It's a chidush to us because years later we came. But at the end of the day, it was already
Not
released into
necessarily.
humanity. What do you mean not necessarily?
That's not necessarily correct.
There's no
That's
Torah
not,
that wasn't dispelled by then. Moshe
that's
Rabbeinu
not
knew it.
necessarily correct. That's not necessarily correct.
Okay.
We're talking about
That's not necessarily
the,
correct. One second, let me just respond. That's not necessarily correct. The whole Torah Shabbat Peh, there are many things, as I said the other day, Moshe Rabbeinu did not know everything. It's encompassed in there. But every time we learn Torah Shabbat Peh, we reveal deeper things that were not revealed earlier. So everything was given in a concentrated form, like a seed, but that not necessarily experienced it. Moshe Rabbeinu himself and all the great people of that generation would actually very much have pleasure in learning Chassidus. They wouldn't say, "Oh, we know this already from before." These things came out. So that's number one. And but since you bring Matan Torah, that was one of the examples I gave. Because of the great revelation, all the forces on the other side come to challenge it because the stakes are high. And that's why there was talking the Chet Egel. And by Yom Kippur, Hashem said the second tablets, this time we're going to do it a lot quieter. It shouldn't arouse, so to speak, an ayin hara of the negative energies that will come to challenge this great revelation.
That's your answer, I guess.
Well, I said that before at length. That was exactly what I was saying.
Mhm.
And I added a lot more to that. There's a lot more to it. Because like the story with why was Pnimi, if Torah is such a beautiful thing to reveal, why indeed was Pnimis Torah not revealed until the later generations? It should have been celebrated from the beginning. Everyone should have learned Pnimis Torah. Because Pnimis Torah carries very, very deep secrets. Pnimis Torah is the precious, the jewel, and most people don't appreciate it. Like why the page was falling on the floor, and like the child that's sick, and even then all the liquid spills on the floor, means it's being wasted. However, so anything with great power, if it's not appreciated properly, can be abused. Anyway, I just suggest if anyone wants, just listen to it again, because I think I answered it pretty comprehensively. If there's a line that I said that you need explanation, I'm happy to do so. But the whole point of what I said was exactly that question.
And especially that Mashiach told about Shem Tov that spreading this now will bring the Geula. So the danger that the Satan was fighting so much against the Alter Rebbe, and maybe more in our generation that we are even closer, this should not happen because this is the revelation today brings the Geula.
One thing I found very interesting that it's not about what rabbis and all was revealed. It's about how we receive it and what we will do with this knowledge. The concern was not that it came out to reality. The concern was how we will use it. You are right, but it's not just one person or two persons. It's the whole world supposed to be submerged in this knowledge. And if we, as some kind related to this from the first hand, as I may say, we have a great responsibility to promote and give send it forward. It's not for us to keep it. We have this intense responsibility right now to do something with it. Not something, but particularly something that he wants us to do in order not to be hurt with this. You see why Rabbi had the concern? He didn't believe that if he will release it, it would be accepted accordingly the wish of the God. That's
okay, listen,
why
this is I gave my explanation. What you're saying, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure if it resonates with me per se, but I hear what you're saying.
So the bottom line is the concern over the lumadza, the what negative forces might try to undermine this revelation, and that if
That's much more than that, but that's part of it. Yeah, much more because the same reason revelation of Pnimis Torah didn't happen all the generations. So when someone starts doing that, that's a big responsibility. You're doing something that not Rabbi Akiva and not and not besides the Rashbi was only Yechidei Gula. Not all the greats, not the Rambam, not Rashi, nobody did. There's a reason they didn't do it. So when you start something, so the Sitra Achra is definitely a big part of the story, but it's the whole thing. It's a whole new thing. Whenever there's a new thing, it's with a great responsibility. That's why the Alter Rebbe asked the Baal Shem Tov and Magd whether he should continue. Maybe he was doing the wrong thing.
And it's not only about our group. All who started
remember also
supposed to be united.
Remember also that one of the reasons the non-Chassidim, the Misnagdim, were against it, they said exactly that. It was never taught in public. Few individuals. The Gra himself was a Makubal. He wrote books on Kabbalah. So how could he be against the Chassidim, learning Chassidus? Because he felt it was only for individuals, not for everyone. Because most people wouldn't appreciate it, they would abuse it. It's like many things. Certain secrets are only kept internally because you have to know how to appreciate it. It's very sensitive material. Same question, like why do we have such high security when it comes to a certain high sensitive intelligence? Because number one, it could be leaked to the wrong people. Number two, very sensitive things need to be appreciated properly, and if they're not, it can be abused or even damaged. Look, there are people that use Kabbalah in the wrong way. The Shabtai Tzvi, Jacob Frank, they learned Kabbalah and then they abused it. They turned it into orgies and they misunderstood major concepts of Yichud and Zivug, and they turned it into very physical, hedonistic behavior, the worst possible, all dressed up in the language. You see, people who are very spiritual can also be very destructive people today as well, especially in the area of sexuality. You also find people, the dark forces, people trying to use the occult, black magic and stuff like that. So it's you're talking about stuff that is extremely potent, you can say. Like anything that if very powerful, if it's not used properly, can be very, very destructive.
I find what you just said very helpful in clarifying the chashash. And I guess for me, it was one thing to understand it conceptually, which I did, and another thing to hear you articulate how might the Sitra Achra manifest in the Tachlis in real terms. And that's the connection I wasn't really getting.
Okay.
So thank you for expanding.
Yes.
Sure.
And as you usually said, it's better prevention than treatment of the disease. The prevention for taking it over with the Sitra Achra, we have to initiate this from the light side, from the especially those who involved in studying. I'm a last person in this picture, but those who teaching Ayin Beis and their groups, I believe all of you have to be united somewhere, not one teach here, another teach here. Some kind of bridge is supposed to be built.
Exactly right. That's our job. Yafutza ma'anesecha chutza. Mashiach said that when you spread the mayonas chutza. This also explains the hisnagdus, why Chassidus does come up with so much resistance, because whenever there's something great about to happen, there's always going to be resistance.
As soon as
It was at the later Maimorim, after Ayin Beis were by the Rebbe, after Ayin Beis was published, and he went through this and that, and then it was out. Did that change the character of his Maimorim? Did it reflect that new thing that he took the risk of the?
Actually, it's hard to say. I will say this: in the early years, in the early 50s, the Rebbe was extensively reviewing and discussing things in Ayin Beis that we didn't know was from Ayin Beis. But the Rebbe had the manuscript. So in early years of 50s, the Rebbe was a lot of my Maimorim are literally almost word for word from Ayin Beis.
Yep. Yeah, I'm learning the early ones, and I got that idea, and I thought maybe I was completely washed out and wrong about it.
No, in the early years. Later years, not so much, actually. That's
Now I'm
just
learning
another.
Yud Zion. I'm learning Yud Zion now, and
Yeah.
it's pretty wild.
It is. It is pretty wild, and yeah. Okay. Now the question is, what are we going to do next for an encore?
I would love to learn the Rebbe's Maimorim. That's my opinion. Everybody seems to be against it, but I'm for it.
Yeah.
What do you have any instincts, Rabbi, personally?
I think that the Rebbe's Maimorim is also an idea.
I don't know.
Everything is an idea. Nothing is off limits.
I'm curious to hear.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure because it's not about me per se. I can learn on my own whatever I want to learn. It's really what would be best for this for our group here, and would be the biggest contribution. I think of it in terms of what would be the best contribution to the group here, and also by extension because it's all being recorded for the larger public.
I think Samech Vav would be a good. I mean, I know everybody has their opinion, but
No, listen. So in other words, you're thinking more like what's good, what you like. I'm thinking more what would be best for
no,
the largest.
it's not just for me. It's the general pub. I don't think anybody has extensive like the way you did the Ayin Beis.
Yeah, but you could say that about every mimer. But you
No,
could
but
say
you
that
didn't.
about
But
any-
Samech Vav is something like it's like really like it's next best thing to Ayin Beis. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not even comparing, but you know what I mean.
Well, the one thing I'd say about Samach Vav, George, even though I too would love to learn with Rabbi Jacobson, is that large aspects of it are incorporated by implication, by assumption, by presumption in Ayin Base. Now, obviously, not in the degree of detail, but to a certain extent, Rabbi Jacobson has already shared the key portions of the Chassidus of Samach Vav in order to understand the Chassidus of Ayin Base. So,
No, he did
Yeah,
not.
but that
He
would be
did
in
not.
general terms. What George is referring to, once you start learning it, you'll see is a lot. It opens up a whole new vista.
Oh yeah. And nobody, I don't think, at my best of knowledge, nobody has done it the way you've done Ayin Beis. I don't think anybody has done Samech Vav. That's what I'm saying.
and man, those are great points. Also, the fact that you're so familiar with the Chassidus of the Rebbe Rashab, you're uniquely situated to do that, to have a public library of explanation of Samach Vav, like you have just now, thank God, completed for Ayin Base. It's a gift to us as your immediate students, but to the
And
world.
also, I think it's Yitzchak, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but it's also looking at Samech Vav with Ayin Beis glasses. I think that's another
Exactly,
level. You know what I'm saying?
That's well said, George. Well said, George.
George, you're
Listen,
right.
exactly. It's a
listen.
wonderful.
I didn't say. I'm not making an argument against it. I think there's a good argument to be made for it. I'm not denying that. I'm just thinking, honestly, I'm thinking through. I'm not positive. I was just learning a mimer from the Mittler Rebbe, and I had a feeling, a few mimer of the Mittler Rebbe that I just recently was looking at, connected to our themes. And I thought it would be unbelievable to learn those mimer. Remember, we learned the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe, however, is a lot more difficult than the Rebbe Rashab. It's less, it's much more complicated. Not the ideas, the way he presents them. But anyway, I don't want to. Let me give it some more thought. We'll see.
I mean, the other idea would be to learn, like you said, some of those key source Maimarim in detail. You must have referenced a couple dozen in your essay alone. I mean, I don't know, I didn't count them, but a lot.
Yeah.
And now that we have the big picture, it would be fascinating to go into those source Maimarim and see how it gets put together there.
Yeah. Well, all good stuff. I'll figure out what to do tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll figure out for tomorrow, but we'll come to something. It's also fitting. We're about to start a new year, so.
Exactly.
It's interesting what kind of algorithm Chabad.org used that allowed each of the speaker say maybe at the same topic, but absolutely unique and different, and how they were able to collect such a library that amazingly develop the ideas of Hasidim in such a broad perspective. And if there is such kind of algorithm,
I'm
I
not
would
even sure what you're asking. What are you referring to? What algorithm are you referring to?
Chabad.org
What about it?
has a lot of classes concerning all Hasidim, especially Parsha Hasidim. For example, if we take Torah and use Chabad.org to study it, it will bring us to such a broad perspective of so many authors.
I don't know if there's an algorithm. It's just simply they collected like an encyclopedia. They aggregated a lot of content. I don't know if there's an algorithm.
It's impossible that none of them repeat each other.
It's different sources. It's like bringing together hundreds of different sources into one place.
And they do repeat each other. They do take the same
No,
things.
they won't reprint
There
the
is
same
some,
article twice.
but there's some overlap.
There's plenty of overlap, but I'm saying they won't publish the same article twice. As a matter of fact, there's more algorithm and meaningful life because we use AI now. But I don't know if there's an algorithm. I think they just collected a lot of material. So if you go to the Parsha, you can find a big, wide range of material. And they won't print it twice. So I'm not, where do you see an algorithm at work?
I see so many different people with so many different...
That's simply collecting. It's like called aggregating a lot of content that their editors choose, and they built it over the last 30 years. They built up a very vast library of content.
How does this relate to what we're proposing to?
Anyway, you know what? I never even ended the recording. If you don't mind, let me end the recording a moment, if you don't mind. So we finished my essay, page 40.